Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to Post Sports Live. I'm your host, Jonathan Forsythe. And rejoining us in the studio is LaVar Arrington, fresh off Super Bowl week. How was New York?
It's good.
Yeah?
It's fast.
Fast?
Like New York fast.
Yeah? Different than other Super Bowls you've covered?
It was different. It was different because I think that it was so spread out. So much was in New Jersey. You didn't know what was really going on in New Jersey if you were in New York. And if you were in New York, you could tell that it was a Super Bowl, but it didn't feel like anything was different. It just felt like another day in New York City, which was kind of interesting.
Always stuff going on there. Dan Steinberg, of course, of the DC Sports Blog, and Jason Reid as well are joining us. As usual, got a lot to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Redskins and what they can learn from the Seahawks' blueprint of winning Super Bowl 48 in convincing fashion over the Broncos. We'll talk about Kyle Shanahan and his new gig in Cleveland and whether or not Kirk Cousins could be a target for him, a team that needs a quarterback. Based on the end of the season, I'm not so sure, but I'd love your guys' opinion. Then we're going to talk about the Wizards finally over the 500 curse, whether or not that's a big deal, and John Wall, finally making the All-Star team too. We've had that debate on the show of who would make the first All-Star team, whether Beal or Wall, and I think somebody, myself, on that side of the argument was right.
How are you right?
I was right because Wall got there first.
Well, hold on now. Let's be clear. Wall did not make the All-Star game.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Wall was put in the game.
Well, what equivalent? That's a technicality.
Voting.
All right.
No way.
Then finally, we'll wrap up with hockey. Really? We'll talk about the NHL playoffs versus Olympic hockey with Sochi right on the horizon, starting on Thursday. All right,
you were
Jason.
not right. That's incorrect.
Are you crazy?
You're crazy to say that. That's not an All-Star
voting. You're going to rely on the fan
voting. All right,
voting?
we're going to start the show.
We'll get to this part. Is he in the game because somebody is not playing, or is he in the game because he was voted in to play?
Not voted. He's a reserve.
He's a reserve. He's not replacing somebody. Let's get to John Wall after the Super Bowl. We'll get plenty to get to. I like the start of the show already.
Crazy. I know that.
Mr. Reid, I want to ask you first. I want to ask you first.
Yes.
About what the Redskins specifically can learn from Seattle, who, by all forms of fashion, just had a very surprising outcome in the Super Bowl.
Well, John, I'm glad you asked that. My colleague over here, Dan Steinberg, wrote a great post. He writes many great posts, but wrote a great post on John Schneider and his time here with the Redskins. Marty Schottenheimer brought him in for the 1 year that Marty was here. He was a 30-year-old wonderkind, a guy who, you looked at and people said, this guy is going to be a great, GM for long. They hire him at 30 years old, and because Dan Snyder wasn't having fun playing with his toy, he fired Marty Schottenheimer. And also, when Marty left, Schneider got fired. So you hire this 30-year-old whiz kid, and you don't even let him preside over one draft. Now,
yes, he did. Yes,
did he preside over one draft?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
And he brought in guys like Ross Tucker.
Okay.
Like Antonio Pierce. Okay. Like Kenny Watson, which all are names who put in multiple years of production in the National Football League.
Well, then it's even worse then.
Yes.
I didn't think he even had a draft.
Yes, he did.
But then you fire him, okay? And he goes on. He has a very successful career with the Green Bay Packers. He was with the Packers before, went back there. And he's helped. Pete Carroll has final say. But Schneider has helped him. They have a true partnership. And I heard this ridiculous stat, like there are 21 low-round draft picks and undrafted free agents on the Seahawks roster in prominent roles.
That's what he did here.
And it would be
Ife
here.
Leahy, it was that draft with Ife out of USC.
USC, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do think. Can I say something?
I just want to say one more thing. To me, this illustrates the absurdity of the Dan Snyder era of ownership. You hire this guy who consensus around the league at 30 years old, this guy is a real up-and-comer, but you fire a coach who clearly had the thing pointed in the right direction and brought in a guy who could have helped him build it and sustain it for years, and you do it because you're not having fun. And then what follows is, another 10 years of mediocrity at best. You look what the Seahawks have done, and I'll take it a step further. Trent Baalke, the general manager of San Francisco, also was a Redskins player.
He's just taking everything from you guys.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
I'm about to end right now.
Sometimes it's good to hear from somebody else.
I'm about to end this right now. From at least my point, I'll let them talk if they want to. But when you look at the situation here, the way you win in the salary cap era is you have 1, 2, or 3 core guys who you pay, and you rotate everybody else in and out after their rookie contracts come up when you don't have to pay them the minimum anymore. That's what you do. That's the formula to win. And Schneider and Balke, guys who were in this front office and who are now presiding or at least have prominent roles with the 2 most successful teams or the 2 strongest teams in the NFL.
Arguably the 2 best teams in the NFL.
Arguably the 2 best teams were here. And now you've handed it over to a guy who has never built anything. I don't even know what you say to that.
I didn't realize this was going to turn into a rant. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, there's not a lot of time left. I'll just be brief.
Go ahead. We'll add a minute.
I think to some extent it's a little bit unfair to say this guy was here for 1 year, 14 years ago. You know, you could look at Bill Belichick, who was fired from Cleveland, obviously, and you're not going to necessarily fault the Browns for that. The thing that I think is important is the latter point about finding these gems and then developing them into superstars. And just if you look at probably their 2 most famous players, at least, Richard Sherman and Russell Wilson, neither of those guys were top draft picks. You know, the Redskins obviously hit on Alfred Morris, but other than that, when you think of their key pieces, it's all guys taken at the top. It's, you know, the Trent Williams, the RG3, the
Kerrigan,
Arakpo.
Those free agency.
I was there when that draft took place. I was there with Marty. That did happen here. We started off slow. We lost. Everybody knows the story. We lost 5 straight. But after that,
somebody had a key interception against Carolina.
Well, we did have that here. You did have a core nucleus of guys, and you were bringing in quality guys. Again, Antonio Pierce led that charge of that defense in New York City. It wasn't Michael Strahan. It wasn't O.C. Umenyior. It wasn't Justin Tuck. It was Antonio Pierce, an undrafted free agent that was brought here to the Washington Redskins. We did have that here. Lamar Marshall. You can name a lot of names of players that were brought here that were productive players and would have turned out to be those type of guys on this team. Now, I will add to this, to the point. You have to have a coaching staff that is able to do what it is that they do. And Marty's coaching technique, his coaching style is different from a Harbaugh. It's different from a Pete Carroll. I think the ability to relate to his players the way that he does and the rest of that coaching staff relates to the players the way that they do.
Pete Carroll, you mean?
Pete Carroll's coaching staff. You saw it in college, and he handles things the same exact way. And I found it to be interesting listening to the reports that were coming out of their practices. They were practicing. They weren't using full pads, but what they were doing were going all out competition, first versus first. You never have that. It's always scout cards and different things. He makes these guys compete, and they love it. And so if the Redskins wanted to learn something, I would say it's the coaching staff that has to learn from it, because it is a copycat league. You have to have the office, the front office people learn from it, and you have to have the ownership pay attention to it. Let people do their jobs, I think that's the first step of all of this, is allow for guys to do their jobs. Bruce Allen's never really built a team, but he understands caps and salaries. Good. Let your scouts do their job. You dictate and control the salaries. Let that coach do his job. Let him maneuver and do what he needs to do relationship-wise and trust-wise, and go from there. That's what they can learn from this.
Also,
when the buzzer sounds,
the buzzer sounded, we went over time, but that was good. That's a good way to sum it up.
Sure.
Lot of other things the Redskins can learn, but we'll move on and keep those for other shows. We'll talk about the roster moves and free agents in weeks ahead. Guys, I want to talk about Kyle Shanahan now, Jason. And he lands in Cleveland. First of all, are you surprised that he gets a gig in Cleveland, and is that a good job for Kyle?
Well, it's not a good job for anybody. I mean, that ownership group has done a horrible job. There's no other way you can really put it. Now, to me, when I saw Kyle took that job, that's Kyle wanting to be in the league, not wanting to have to sit out a year.
That's exactly
which I get that. I mean, he could have sit out a year. He's under contract next year with the Redskins, but I'm sure there's offset language in there, so that'll take care of that. But Kyle did not want to be out of the game for a year, but that's not a good job. And when you look at the farcical situation you have with hiring the head coach, And now, Kyle was up for the job in Baltimore, didn't get that. He just didn't want to be out the league for a year. So, maybe he can get there and do a good job and get out of there as quickly as possible.
Go ahead, Dan.
I mean,
got some weapons.
Certainly that's a conventional weapon, but that's what I was going to say. They do have some weapons. And with Josh Gordon, certainly a more dangerous weapon than anyone he had in Washington. I think we'd agree on that. Who knows what they're going to do at quarterback, but they also have a bunch of really high draft picks. And they have a strong defense.
I think they had 5 All-Pros on that roster.
Yeah, I'm not saying
but a lot of that was on defense.
I understand why you say it's not a great situation, but I think with Gordon and with the draft picks, I think that there's some potential to, if he can show that he can move the ball and score points in Cleveland, and people are going to say, well, if he can do it in Cleveland, what could he do for us?
Well, that's true. If he can do it in Cleveland, he can do it anywhere. It's not going to happen. It's not. It's Cleveland. It's not going to happen. But I agree with Jay. He took that job because nobody else wanted him. Let's be clear. You're not going to take a Cleveland job after this because you want to go work in Cleveland. He didn't have any choice, and he's in a dangerous place because if he wins, if he plays his hands right, then he is able to name his position on a different team at a certain time. Might even put himself in position to be a head coach if he's able to be productive. If he's not, he's going to be a position coach for the rest of his career.
Yeah, but if he's not, doesn't he have the argument to fall back on? It's Cleveland. Nobody succeeds
here. No,
you
only get so many excuses.
Okay.
He wasn't able to finish it. It looked like a very good deal in Houston. You left Houston where you were gaining a lot of momentum in your reputation. You totally destroyed that here. Now, if you're using his dad as an excuse, then you've given him one reprieve by saying it was his dad. He went somewhere else. You can't keep giving a person excuses. He'll be able to get a job in this league, but ultimately people are looking for production. There are so many. It's so competitive with coaches as well as players. There are other coaches that are showing that they're competitive and they're good at this and are able to get other guys.
He could be coaching 20 years from now.
That's true. And that may be in the latter half of his career that he's able to resurface, but you can forget about it right now if he doesn't make it work.
In the last minute that we have, Jason, Kirk Cousins, likely, unlikely, what percentage odds would you give Kyle for actually looking at Cousins as an option in Cleveland?
Well, first of all, I don't know how much juice Kyle's going to have to do that type of thing. I mean, he's coming into a situation where.
Would he want to consider him?
Well, I think he'd want to consider it. I mean, I definitely think he'd want to consider it. But if you're the let's flip it around. Let's look from the Redskins' perspective. You don't know what Griffin is going to be next year, and he's already shown a history of injury situations. So, I mean, people like, well, trade Cousins. Well, what are you going to get for Cousins? I mean, he didn't play well last year. I remember Mike said, on the radio, oh, you can get a 1. Well, no.
Yeah,
I mean, he was a 4.
Mike, who said that?
Shanahan. he was.
Where's he?
That was before Cousins.
Great decision maker.
Anyway,
his reputation on back.
It was a 4. It was a 4. I don't see anybody giving them more than a 4 for him right now.
You would draft. If you're going to give up a 4 draft pick, you're going to draft a quarterback.
Dan, is Kyle going to the front office in Cleveland saying, "Hey, we should make a run at Kirk Cousins"?
He's not the head coach there.
Right.
This is not like.
But the head coach is a new guy too.
He is a new guy, but if they're gonna start over with a new quarterback, I think you draft a quarterback at that point. It seems unlikely to me.
He's a coordinator, though, right?
Do you agree, LaVar, on
He's an offensive coordinator. He could have enough pull to say,
maybe
I've worked with him. I've got a year in. You're about to run my system here. Let's go. Let's try to get him.
Yeah.
But
I think Lombardi, the GM, has kind of not been high on Cousins in the past, right?
I can't recall.
That'd be the only way you get a draft pick outside of. And again, if you're going to use a late round, the value is a whole
different conversation. The value. They may not come to an agreement.
If you're going to use a late round draft pick, forget about it because you can just draft a quarterback if you're going to use a late round.
All right, let's go on, guys, to the Wizards. Jason, you wrote a column this morning.
Actually, I wrote it last night.
Last night, I'm sorry. Most people read it this morning. All right, fine, fair. That's all right. I guess today, in today's day and age, a lot of people read it last night on the web. Anyway,
I'm sorry.
Thank you for getting technical on me there. I want to ask the question of: is it more important that they got over 500 and that sort of mythical sort of hump, so to speak, or is it more important the teams they beat to get there?
That's John. That's an interesting question. I mean, they beat Oklahoma City, and then I was at the game last night. Portland. I was at the game last night. Sorry.
And they won in Phoenix. So.
And they won.
And Golden State.
They beat Golden State. So they're beating some good teams. But I think that's definitely part of the equation. But for me, the big thing was just to see the sense of relief that these guys had. I mean, you know what? I know, like, across the country, people are probably laughing at this. They're a game over 500. Hey, but you know, as low as this organization was, it's significant for them.
First time in John Wall's career, Dan.
Yeah, and it had been by far the longest streak of any team in the NBA of not getting above 500. I mean, so I think that it did kind of rise above a little statistical oddity, and it was, 5 years is a long time. I think that it actually was more important to get over 500 because we've seen that they can lose to bad teams in the pursuit of 500, which they did a bunch of times this year. Normally, I think kind of arbitrary milestones are just arbitrary and meaningless, but I think this time it happened so many times, one after another, getting to 500, then falling back. And they were getting asked about it. I think they knew that this was a big deal. Yeah, right? They knew this was a big deal. So I think it is significant that they got over. And with the way the schedule sets up now, obviously I'm getting ahead of myself, but they could get, a fair bit above 500 over the next couple of weeks. So I think it's kind of significant.
Returning to Eastern Conference play, would you agree that getting over the 500 level is more important than the teams they've beaten recently to get there? All of them mostly playoff teams in the West.
I think it means more that they beat those teams in the West, if you ask me. Getting to over 500 should not be that much of a moral victory. If you're trying to be a better team, if you're trying to climb to the playoffs and become that team where you're a competitive team, 500, sure, you want to have milestones, benchmarks, but I think that you also want to be able to say, look, along the way we showed that we can beat the best of the best. And I think as a player, when you're competing and you're getting wins, you pay attention to who you're getting wins and losses against. I mean, winning against the Baltimore Ravens when they won the Super Bowl was way more impactful to me and I'm sure to my teammates than it was us beating Cleveland or someone like that.
We're dumping on Cleveland.
It's just the truth. Which funny thing is they made the playoffs before we did, and when I got drafted, and those were the two teams that was going to draft me. But I think it means a lot more to those players to win against those types of teams. If they had broke 500, okay, you hit a benchmark for breaking 500, but if you did it against teams that weren't very good or competitive, I don't think that it means very much.
And I think for the national spotlight, I think certainly the fact that they're taking out the Miami Heat, they're taking out the Thunder, they're taking out the Blazers, I think that's kind of more important nationally. And I think there was one ESPN.com power ranking today that had the Wizards 12th in the entire NBA. Wow. That's not because they're a game over 500. That's because they're beating some of the best teams in the
league.
Only
team in the league to have beaten the Heat, Thunder, and the Blazers by double digits this year. I mean, there's something to that, right? So let's shift the conversation.
That's Jay Reid trying to clear his throat to say something good about John Wall being
Here we
an
go.
All-Star game.
Let's shift to John Wall making the All-Star game. And guys, obviously, there's been a lot of conversation over the years on this show and other outlets as well about John Wall and his contract status and whether he's a max contract guy and the pressure on him. Is his performance this year, Jason, changing your opinion of him?
Well, it's funny with me and John because people think I think one way about John, and it's not. The bottom line for me is
go ahead, explain.
John is playing much better than I ever thought he could, and he is doing things on the court right now where he's actually becoming the type of guy the Wizards have longed for so long. So I don't think my opinion has changed of him in terms of like him as necessarily a person, but in terms of him as a player, yeah, because he's doing things now. I mean, he's never going to be the greatest jump shooter in the world, but he's hitting his jumper more to where you say to yourself, well, if he can do that with his other physical tools, okay, now they've really got something. So I definitely think that he's playing at a high level, and he deserved to be put on this team.
On the All-Star team.
He deserved to be.
I want to pass my time to LaVar because I'm curious what he
let's add a minute because I want. We might need more than that. Go ahead, LaVar.
I think he's playing at an All-Star level. But there's a difference between being a reserve. We call it in football an alternate. There's a difference between being a pick and being a reserve. Let's just be clear on that because I know that's what you want to hear. And it's certainly not absurd or crazy to sit there.
So you're saying the only real All-Stars are 10 players who are starting in the game?
The real All-Stars are the ones that are picked for the game, like not an alternate. When you go as an alternate, it's almost like by default. Like if I'm misunderstanding this.
You're misunderstanding this.
Did he get picked
He got picked by the coaches. He didn't get voted in by the fans for a popularity contest. He got picked by the coaches to be an NBA All-Star.
But did he not? All right. See, I was under the understanding that he got picked because another player was not playing.
I understand.
That's it. Well, then I'm misinformed. I'm misinformed.
Let me just say that I understand what you're saying because in the NFL, that's the way it works.
Right.
Now, but in this situation, the fans pick the starters, and then the coaches actually picks the reserve. Now there are situations where guys get hurt, and then like Kobe, like Kobe was picked as a starter, but there'll be someone
and
takes
that's what I thought took place. So then I
now,
stand corrected.
What cynics will say is that it took Rose and Rondo being hurt for John to become
Which is probably true, but it doesn't matter. That's here nor there.
His numbers are still
exactly.
worthy of All-Star consideration. Dan, did you have anything to add quickly on the All-Star conversation? John Wall-Star, like that nickname? All right.
He said it like he rests his case. I was misinformed. I thought
that's fair.
I thought as a reserve.
None of us are perfect.
And I'm close. It was my understanding that he was a reserve and that he was a replacement.
We'll give you a
because
pass
an alternate in football is a guy who comes and plays because Brett Favre or Randy Moss isn't
like
going to play
this year,
like
for the Redskins. Right,
exactly.
I hear you.
Right.
Also, Morris. All right.
There you go.
Let's move on, guys, to the Sochi Winter Olympics are just on the horizon. They're about to start on Thursday, opening ceremonies. You guys excited about the Olympics at all?
Don't be lame.
No, not at all. You guys aren't even listening to me right now. That's great.
No, we're doing some inside bits.
I'm kind of excited.
Are you excited about the Olympics?
You know what I'm excited about? And not that anyone cares about my life, but my daughter will be more excited to watch the Olympics than she would a lot of American regular season team sports. And
Why
I
do you think
that's
that
cool.
is?
I think that there's a certain really elemental quality to races, like ski races and running races. And
I thought you were going to go to the figure
agree.
skating. I thought you were going to go to
No,
the figure
things
skating.
where
I thought you were going to go to black and white.
No, where 2 people or 4 people are out there and trying to see who can go the fastest. I think that's something that really appeals.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm looking forward to some of the extreme sports, the snowboarding stuff. Anyway, the question here, Mr. Arrington, let's get this back on the tracks. What would you rather watch? NHL playoff hockey, which a lot of people argue is the best playoffs of any sport, or Olympic hockey, where the ice is a little bit more open, there seems to be a little bit more scoring generally. Which one would you prefer?
I would prefer the Olympics over the playoffs for hockey. And the reason being is because when you're talking about the Olympics, you're talking about nations competing against other nations. There are a lot. When you talk about basketball, or if football was an Olympic sport, I generally love track and field and boxing because you just don't know who the best athletes are in those sports. So you like to watch it play out. In hockey, I just don't know who the best athletes, who the best players are in hockey. And so being able to watch nations come and play in hockey, I think it would be more fun to watch the Olympics and see who runs for gold because everybody's with their native countries and different things like that, and they're competing against one another.
One vote for Olympics, Dan.
I don't like the Olympic hockey that much, and here's why. I think that, obviously the rules are cool, and there's lots of scoring, and there's lots of national pride, but it seems to me like hockey has so many quirks in it and so many kind of fluky goals here and there that the idea of like a single elimination, obviously they have the pool play at the beginning, but the single elimination medal round, it just seems too fluky to me. I like the best of 7 series, and I know that it gets old and goes into, it gets long and it goes into June and whatever, but I feel like a lot of times the best team in a series wins, and I don't know that you can always say that in this kind of single elimination format. I guess that makes it maybe more thrilling and more exciting, but sometimes I just feel like, that really was the best team?
But a playoff is a playoff.
Yeah, it's like an NCAA tournament of hockey.
You could say that about football. It could be fluky
that
that Seattle blew out Denver.
It is. That's true. It's true. But I like best of 7 series. I think that you kind of learn something.
Jason, break the tie.
Well, hockey. Hockey. I'm sorry.
Hockey, correct. Okay,
Olympics. Olympics.
Olympics. You go Olympics over. All right. Let me ask you guys this as a follow. Which of the 3 capitals that are playing, representing their different countries, would you prefer to see?
Actually, 4 now.
Is it 4 now?
Iraq got named to the Czech team today.
Okay. All right. So of the 4 capitals, would you rather see wearing gold in Sochi? You got Carlson for the U.S., of course, of national pride there. You got Ovi representing Russia, obviously, and you got Backstrom in Sweden.
I'm going to answer a different question than the one you asked.
All right.
Obviously,
Carlson. Carlson for the Team USA.
I'm USA, bro.
All right,
USA.
That's why I'm gonna.
All right, I should have said, all right, other than
That's
Carlson.
why I'm gonna kind of switch it a little bit and say that I think that for the Capitals, it would be best if Ovechkin wins, because I could see it possible that if they have a disappointing performance in his home country, with him really being the face of these games, I could see that leading to like a funk that carries over here. Not necessarily, but I could see it happening. Whereas if he gets gold, I think he might come here and just like rip off the NHL for the rest of the season.
Yeah, there's so much pressure on his shoulders.
It's a great
too.
theory, Dad.
And being the face of the Olympics in Russia. I mean, there's
That
really
was far
something to
from
that.
lame, brother. That was far from
How
lame.
about a Russia versus USA final for the gold? That would be fun.
It would be
Carlson
thrilling. There's so, like you said, there's so much pressure on him, and just we've seen already people arriving there. His pictures all over the airport. His pictures all over the Olympic Village. There's Coke machines all over Sochi with his picture on it. You know, if they fall on their faces there, it is going to be a humiliating, terrible experience for him. I really think that.
So we should all be rooting for Team Russia. And the Caps,
I'm
speaking of the
rooting
Caps,
for Team USA.
they've got
I'm
three.
sorry,
They've got 3 games, winnable games before
American
the Olympic
Jack.
break against the Islanders, Winnipeg, and New Jersey. Right now they're 3 points out of the playoffs.
All at home.
But they're all at home
Yeah.
against winnable teams, so they should be able to get into a good
That's
spot.
big.
Those are big. All right. That's the end of the show, guys. We'll end with that. For Jason Reid, Dan Steinberg, LaVar Arrington, welcome back in the saddle.
Thank you.
I'm your host, Jonathan Forsythe. Thanks for joining us on Post Sports Live. We'll see you next Tuesday, right here, same time, same place.
Once again, another team wins the Super Bowl.